Join UF Hall of Famer and 14-year NFL vet Shane Matthews every weekday as he brings you all you need to know about your Florida Gators, including news, analysis, and opinions with some of the biggest names in sports. Find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Or watch us live at 8 a.m. on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter.
Two, one. Good morning. Welcome to a Thursday edition of PodUp with Matthews in the Morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. Large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Hello, friends. It's Masters Weekend. We are teeing it up right now, and we're going to have a good talk with our college football analyst, Brent Beaird. Second portion of today's program, you'll have Seth Harp take over. But let's go to the Titan MR Hotline. We're joined by our Heisman Trophy voter, Brent Beaird. Good morning, Brent. How you doing?
Shane, good morning. It's we're actually a couple of days away from our first spring football games for the SEC. Vanderbilt and Auburn both play on Saturday, and then we have a slew of them that come up next week. So we are, as usual, excited about that. That should be a lot of fun to be able to see what some of these teams are doing that we get to see on the field.
Very true. Brent, are you a big, do you get into the Masters?
A little bit. I mean, it's hard not to not to be able to do that around here. Hopefully the weather will hold out for them during this time too. So, I mean, of course, we just had TPC down here. Well, those guys will be over there, will be up there too.
Have you ever been fortunate enough to go to Augusta National, Brent?
No, I haven't. I haven't. I'm sure that would be a bucket list thing to be able to go.
Yeah, it's one of the prettiest places in the world, and you definitely have to do that for sure. So I'll be glued to the TV as much as I can. It's one of my favorite. It is my favorite golf tournament ever. So Brent, as you said, spring games have kicked off, but before we jump around the league, it's been talked about for, it seems like years and years and years, about these spring games, about the big boys kind of playing a smaller, like a group of five type school for the spring game, which obviously would be very interesting for the fans. I think the players would enjoy it. I think it could be a little payday for some of the smaller schools. There's a lot of traction out there right now. Do you think it could happen?
Well, where this came up again was Hugh Freeze was the one who talked about this, and he said, why don't we just play another school? And he mentioned some of the smaller schools in the state of Alabama, like UAB and Troy, and Trent Dilfer, the new coach at UAB, said he would love to be able to do that. And John Summerall at Troy said the same thing. Now, I'll give credit to Football Scoop because they got Todd Berry on the phone, who is the executive director of the AFCA and a member of the NCAA Football Oversight Committee. And Todd said, look, we've been talking about this for 20 years. We have voted on it before, and the coaches have been kind of all over the place with that. Barry said that the concern now might be the transfer portal, in that the transfer portal, and again, I thought this was May 1. What I've come to learn now, Shane, is the transfer portal is opening now April the 15th. It will be open during that time. So it's going to be open before then. But the reality of it is, I mean, and Barry also maybe suggested, well, why don't we drop back to 11 regular season games and play a 12th game as a true preseason game? So there's a little bit that's mentioned about this from time to time. I think it'd be a great idea, frankly, if they were able to do it and get some cooperation with it. But it usually comes up this time of year, and it has again.
Yeah, and I saw on Twitter some of the possible matchups, and I'm going to run through them real quick. Alabama versus UAB, Arkansas versus Arkansas State, Auburn versus Troy, Florida versus UCF, Georgia versus Georgia State, LSU versus Tulane, Ole Miss versus Jackson State, Mississippi State versus Southern Miss, Missouri versus Kansas, South Carolina versus App State, Tennessee, and Memphis, A&M against Houston, Texas versus SMU, and Oklahoma versus Tulsa. So that I think it's very interesting. We'll see what happens, but anyway, I think it would be cool for the fans. I think the players would enjoy it as well. Brent, anything else going on around the NCAA landscape before we jump into the around the SEC?
I think one of the more interesting things that I've seen is at Nebraska, and I'll make this quick. But Nebraska, the last any amount of success that Nebraska has had was with Frank Solich, and he's 78 now, and they're going to bring him back for their spring game. He won 75% of his games over 6 seasons, and that really wasn't enough. So they decided to fire him. And as you know, he goes to Ohio and does really well. But there had always been this kind of a gap between Solich and Nebraska. And I give Trev Alberts, the athletic director, some credit because he wanted to try to mend some fences here. Matt Rule is the first-year coach at Nebraska. So they're hoping by bringing him back and honoring him that will begin more of certainly a better relationship with Frank Solich. I don't know if you've ever met him, Shane, but I really give him credit for what he frankly did after leaving Nebraska, because this guy was and has been a good head coach all his life.
He really has. And when you talk about winning 75% of your games at Nebraska, boy, ever since I think they've had 5 or 6 coaches since him, they would take that 75% in a heartbeat. So
really,
they took him for granted. At Chris Doring Mortgage, they do mortgage lending right, helping home buyers throughout Gainesville and North Central Florida. Call Chris Doring Mortgage today at 352-244-0840. Speaking with Brent Beaird on the Titan MR hotline. All right, Brent, let's jump around the SEC. Any news, anything coming out of Tuscaloosa?
They are going through spring practice, and they are trying to do what they can to kind of redo their offensive line. The offensive line was decent last year. They think it's going to be much better this year. Darren Dalcourt comes back. J.C. Latham comes back. They've got guys to build around. Now, what they would, and they think they can do at this point, is be a lot more physical in the line of scrimmage. They really want to be able to run the ball when they want to. Remember, Shane, the last few years, they've gotten into 3rd and 2 and 4th and 1 and had to throw the ball. So that's a real issue for them, that they want to kind of reestablish a line of scrimmage. They've got a kid who's a true freshman from Iowa, Caden Proctor, who is 6'6", 300, and they're excited about what he's going to do too. So, Shane, as you've always told us, it revolves around how the offensive line goes, and Alabama is no exception.
Not at all. Arkansas, we all know that Kendall Briles has left there. Dan Enos has come back. I think KJ Jefferson is back.
He is.
What are you hearing about Arkansas?
Rocket Sanders is back too. Is one of the better running backs in the league, along with Ole Miss's running backs. Enos, when he was at Maryland, they converted 41% of the third downs. That was 43rd in the nation. That's okay. It's not great, but they do think they will be okay because Enos was there before, and they had some success. Arkansas ran 77 plays per game last year. That was 13th. So they did a good job with the Browns. He's not there anymore. But again, as you mentioned, with Jefferson coming back. That's going to be very important for them.
The Gators picked up a four-star quarterback recruit over the weekend.
Yeah, Austin Simmons is a guy that they picked up. He's a top 100 prospect, and they certainly like him. Now, I had a chance to be at the Clay County Gator Club Monday night, Shane, and Billy Napier was the guest speaker. So he met with the media. We enjoyed that. He talked about a variety of things. Obviously, thinks the culture is going to be better. Talked about how difficult it was in the first year, just kind of getting set, getting the culture ready to go. Didn't talk a lot about the quarterbacks, but he likes the quarterback room and the running back room. Also likes the offensive line. So I think there's some optimism there. I thought he was well received by the Gator fans who were there. Obviously, Florida's announced this week that they're playing Vanderbilt for their homecoming game. I think what's unusual about that, Shane, I'm sure when you saw that, you noticed the date. That could be a pretty warm October 7th homecoming game.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. But it's you always want to try to schedule Vanderbilt for homecoming, although they beat our butts last year. But hopefully we can get that back this year. The Dogs, a lot of talk about their quarterbacks.
What you really kind of have to wonder here is whoever is in the pecking order. And again, Kirby Smart will be careful enough not to give a depth chart with the quarterbacks. Brock Vandagriff, Carson Beck among that group. I still think it's going to be Carson Beck, frankly, because like Stetson Bennett, he has been there for quite a while. He knows the system. Brock Vandagriff, by the way, has added about 15 pounds of muscle. I thought that was interesting. Carson Beck's actually lost a little bit, so he's back to 220. I'd be curious what you think's kind of an ideal quarterback weight, but that's kind of where they are right now. Defensive end Michael Williams had some surgery to replace a foot injury, so they're trying to get him back as soon as possible. Kendall Milton has a hamstring. He'll miss the rest of the spring, but they've got some pretty good running backs like Dejon Edwards. With that too, Anthony Evans at wide receivers had a kind of a minor injury. Ra Thomas, the Mississippi State transfer, dealing with a bone bruise, but at the same time that they think these guys will be fine. We mentioned Mikael Williams a minute ago when his foot surgery. Obviously, he's out for the rest of the spring for the remainder that Georgia's got to go. So. But I did think that was interesting, Shane, with the quarterbacks. Some have gained weight and some have lost weight.
Yeah, I mean, they're all way bigger than I ever was. The most I ever weighed in college was 180 my senior year. So I would have loved to have been over 200. Mississippi State's a team that, it's just going to be interesting to me how this spring goes. They're changing so much, especially offensively. Any news of note coming out of Stark Vegas?
Well, they do have one guy who's leaving. They've got a redshirt freshman, Marquez Dorich, 6 foot, 160 wide receiver, played in one game. So he is going to be heading to greener pastures as far as what he's concerned. Remember, we've got Will Rogers coming back at Mississippi State. And as Shane mentioned, the thing that they've done is they have decided that they want to, I don't know if they're going to abandon every bit of the air raid offense that Mike Leach had. They're certainly going to be more balanced. And I think what you can see is the quarterbacks being more, I think, not just throwing it to the running backs, but the running backs being a more active part of the offensive system as far as running the ball.
Yeah, for sure. LSU, they lost a lot of guys to going pro. I totally forgot one of their better wide receivers transferred, I think, to TCU. The Beck kid.
Yeah.
Anything else coming out of Baton Rouge?
I think what you're going to see is LSU being picked in the preseason polls, in the magazines, probably to win the West. And I think the reason for that would be because Alabama is not set on quarterback yet. I mean, they've got basically everybody else except the quarterback. So, and then Jaden Daniels comes back for LSU as quarterback. Garrett Nussmeier, I think he's still in the mix with that too. So that would be interesting to see how much he is able to play. But boy, still, Shane, this is going to be a really good football team. In that, and we'll say this a lot, but that opener in Orlando against FSU is going to be one of the bigger games of the year.
It sure is. The Vols, they're in full force now, and I ask you every week about the $8 million quarterback, how he's doing. I still think they're probably going to start the year with Joe Milton, but
yes,
gosh, you got to think if they're investing all this money in Nico Lamaliva, if that's the correct way to say it, that eventually he's going to take over.
Yeah, and you would think he would, and they certainly like him, but they also like Joe Milton, and Joe Milton's played, and Lamaliva really has been very limited at this point. They did have a scrimmage. Tennessee's defense, they played well in the scrimmage, but we also know how the scrimmage can be kind of set up to favor one of the other at this point. I mean, I still think they will be very good. Our favorite name, Squirrel White, comes back, Shane, at wide receiver. So I think they'll be fine there. Jalen Hyatt obviously is going to the NFL. One thing I do want to mention too for Tennessee, and this involves Jeremy Pruitt and some of the coaches that were in the NCAA investigation, but Pruitt and defense coordinator Derek Ansley among some of the coaches scheduled to appear before the NCAA on April 19th through 21st as they still kind of figure out that situation. So we will keep our eye on that one too.
Yeah, moving to the ACC, which we don't talk a lot about, but obviously Florida State's getting a lot of love. I just, Clemson's got a new offense coordinator. I can't remember the kid. Cade Klubnik will be their quarterback. I think he's got a chance to be really good. I still think Clemson's the cream of the crop. But what can you tell us going on at Tallahassee and Coral Gables?
Yeah, at FSU, they did lose Derek McClendon, one of their better defensive linemen, to the transfer portal. That was a little bit of surprise, but they've got Patrick Payton coming back on the line, Jared Verse, Gilbert Edmond, who comes over from South Carolina. That's important too. And on a sad note, you probably remember Dave Van Hellinger, Shane. You remember he was on the Georgia staff and the Florida State staff as a strength and conditioning coach. And Dave, unfortunately, at 69, passed away of a heart attack April the 2nd. So a lot of folks have been talking about that. He was certainly a fixture there for quite some time. So, and by the way, they've got a Rodney Hill, on a better note for FSU, is one of their running backs. I've named him Tornado. He's 5'10", 190. Going to be a good running back. But they've got a really good running back room. Trey Benson, Lawrence Tofilia are among that group. So I think that's going to be fine too. At Miami, Tyler Van Dyke's going to be the quarterback. He is, as you know, he was last year, and they kind of played roulette with their quarterbacks. They've got an early enrollee freshman, Emory Williams, that they're looking at, and they like Ja'Cory Brown. They still think Ja'Cory Brown may be the future for the team. They've got a lot of question marks. I think their offensive line is going to be better this coming year too. So still a tremendous amount of optimism as far as Florida State's concerned. But I'm with you. I still think probably if you compared rosters, that Clemson still has the better roster of anybody in that league.
For sure. Brent, before we get you out of here, give us a few nuggets.
Well, we're always glad to be able to do that. Texas A&M is obviously going through spring, and they're making a lot of changes in some different places too. But I think the thing that's caught people's attention, Bobby Petrino is the offensive coordinator, and the beat writers at Texas A&M will tell you that Bobby Petrino pretty well with the offense has run things, that meaning that Jimbo Fisher's been pretty quiet, if you can believe that, Shane, during practice. Of course, they don't see all the practice, so I'm sure they make up for it in other ways. But that's something to keep your eye on as far as how that situation goes. But again, just a reminder that Auburn will be playing and Vanderbilt playing this weekend. Vandy's at 6, Auburn's at 2. They're both on SEC Network Plus. It's not on the SEC Network, it's not on ESPN, so people are going to have to dig a little bit in order to find it. But we're still watching this Auburn situation pretty close as far as who the quarterback might be for Auburn too. And speaking of the transfer portal, Hugh Freeze has said throughout spring practice that he has not been real pleased with the quarterback situation and that he might go into the transfer portal. And Shane, as you've said a few weeks ago, you've got schools like Ole Miss that have got not one but 3 different quarterbacks. Will one of those quarterbacks get disgruntled if he sees he's not going to be able to play and be in the transfer portal, and a school like Auburn could be able to pick him up?
Yeah, for sure. Brent, great stuff as always, buddy. Who you got winning the Masters?
Oh gosh. I've got to make a pick on this at some point this week, and I'm not really sure who to go with right now. So do like JC does. Just pick the number 1 player in the world. Yeah.
Scotty Scheffler.
I'll go with him. How about that?
Brent, great stuff. Happy Easter to you and your family. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll talk to you next week, buddy.
Sounds good. Thank you much, and happy Easter to you and your family too. Take care.
Yeah, that's Brent Beaird. Join us on the Titan Number Hotline. Celebration points where the Gators go to celebrate with premier brands like Nike, International Diamond Center, Dave & Buster's, Bass Pro Shop, Regal Cinemas, Prime and Pro, and the HBC's restaurant, Spurrier's Gridiron Grill. We'll see you at Celebration Point where the Gators go to celebrate. Can I take a quick time out? When we come back, we'll be joined by Seth Harp. You're watching and listening to PodUp with Matthews in the Morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. We'll be right back.
We want to take this moment to thank our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. Our premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. Meldon Law, the only official injury and accident law attorneys of the Florida Gators. Peaceland Dental, Gator Nation's first choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte. Comfort Temp, comfort is our business, peace of mind is our promise.
Campus USA Credit Union.
QC Kinetics, live pain-free with QC Kinetics. Dave & Buster's, eat, drink, play, and watch. Our gridiron sponsors are Auto ER, UF Bookstores, Celebration Point Town Center, Chris Doring Mortgage, Silverback Concrete Co., Ruse Ogre State Farm Insurance, Doreen Wibby, Realtor Caldwell Banker, MM Parish. Our touchdown sponsors are Adams Ribs, Gator Dominoes, Celebrate Primary Care, Gator Bait Media, Okido America, Style Cuts, Ironwood Golf Course, Big Mills Cheesesteak, McDonald's of Gainesville, 84 Lumber, Tropical Smoothie Cafe, Aver & Smith, Dowling Signs, Baker's Sporting Goods, Silver Q Billiards and Sports Bar. If you're interested in promoting your business on the show, call Freddie at 352-284-3733. If you like what we're doing here, make sure to follow us and support the businesses that support us.
Pro football legend Emmitt Smith understands your joint pain.
It does not surprise me that there are a ton of people out there that's in pain.
That's why Emmitt is such a proponent of QC Kinetics, offering real lasting joint pain relief with non-surgical, all-natural biologic treatments.
Whether it's a joint pain, ankle pain, shoulder pain, neck pain, back pain, hip pain, any kind of pain, the body eventually will break down when it's under that much stress.
That stress can cloud your judgment to the point that you'll just say yes to the scalpel or yes to another prescription of pain pills. But maybe it's time for a second opinion from QC Kinetics.
The reason why I would recommend this is because the natural biologics that QC Kinetics is providing you gives your body a chance to naturally heal itself.
Restorative, regenerative solutions are here. Get lasting relief and live your life.
Call QC Kinetics, 352-400-4550. That's 352-400-4550. QC Kinetics, 352-400-4550.
Well, good Thursday morning to you. Seth Harp on Sports, the voice of Gators women's sports. Kyle Crooks, as we enter the second stanza of PodUp with Matthews in the morning, of course, both of us courtesy of the Titan MRI hotline. And if you have any questions for Kyle or myself via Facebook Live, Meldon Law, the only official law firm partner of the Florida Gators. All right, Kyle, here we are heading into, and look, I always think this time of year and once you're ending one sport and transitioning like full scale into another, kind of get interesting because we have that long football stretch and then the national championship game in football, then the Super Bowl and Final Four. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, now we got 2 months of baseball and softball. Which are good things, right? And you've got the Masters this week. So Major League Baseball season started, so that baton is passed into spring. So let's start off with this first by looking back on basketball. How about that? It came out in the last 24 hours. What, Riley Kugel's coming back?
Yeah.
To Florida. So I ask you this, Kyle. You broadcast several of his games this year. Everybody talked about the importance of him coming back, and I get it. He's the best player on the team. Good enough to put a team on his back and get the Gators not only to the tournament, but is he a second weekend, a Sweet 16 type of player, Kyle?
I think he could be, Seth. I think what we forget is that nobody was talking NBA potential the first half of the year, right? Yeah. Riley was there because he's super athletic, can jump out of the gym. I think part of it was he didn't even have an off season with Florida. There were some issues where he didn't even get a chance to play with the team in the summer. So he was definitely behind the 8 ball. Is he good enough to be the best player on a Sweet 16 team? Yes. The issue is we don't know what this team is going to look like. You go on every transfer prospect that is out there, Florida's in the mix. I think we're looking at 85% roster turnover now. And it's going to be the same on the women's side too. And we all know what it is in college basketball now, the percentage of rosters that get turnover. It is no different here with Florida. I think Riley has the ceiling. You talk with Todd Golden whenever he talks about Riley. He is a first-round NFL draft pick. He is a surefire NBA player. He's going to play at the next level. He can shoot, he can drive, he can defend, he can do just about everything. I think to answer your question, 100%, Riley Kugel is somebody that could take this team to the Sweet 16, dependent on what's around him. But he can be the centerpiece. He can be the best player on a team that makes it to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, for sure, I think.
So now that, okay, he's now moving forward. Now he can start to build around. If you're Todd Golden, the yin to his yang. I mean, let's face it, teams that make the Final Four, teams that get that far usually have two. Now it can be guard forward, it can be a 1 and a 4, it can be a 2 and a 5. It's got to be a combination of those two. So if you're Todd Golden, what are you looking at to be that jelly to that peanut butter or vice versa?
I think an athletic swing person. Look, I think for Florida the last couple years, the issue has been putting the ball in the net, especially from three. I mean, the percentages have not been very good from three. They've been woefully bad from three the last couple of years. The key to success in college basketball, the way that college basketball is being played now, you have to be able to hit it from the outside. The days of the traditional post player on the block, spinning the face and attacking the rim from 5 feet away, those days are pretty much gone for now. Maybe they'll come back eventually. I think you say yin to yang, one or two players. I think you look at San Diego State, Seth. That's a group that's pretty old from you look at their entire roster, they're pretty old. And now you have COVID seniors that are going to start to phase out. So I think we're going to start to head back to more of conventional way we've seen college basketball, where now UConn won and they're a blue blood, but you're going to see more of the blue bloods in the Final 8, Final 4. I think this tournament might be towards the end of where we saw so much parity in college basketball. I think it might phase back in the other direction once COVID seniors phase out. In terms of building the roster around Riley, I would say another athletic swing player. You need a point guard. Lofton, for many, was somewhat of a disappointment this year in terms of the production that he had, but he's still a very good floor general. You need somebody who's going to slow down the game for Riley. I would say a point guard, athletic swing player. If you can get a great big, look, that's still going to go a long way. But there's a lot of pieces, I think, for Riley that are going to have to go around him for this to be successful. And that's obviously no surprise to anybody who follows the team. You're going to need a pretty deep roster to make a deep run.
Kyle Crooks, of course. I am Seth Harp with you here on this Thursday, brought to you in part by Comfort Temp. Comfort is their business. Peace of mind is the promise. Summer on the way. It's going to be 90 degrees today. When was the last time your ACC was tuned up? Get it done now before the summer heat hits. Call Comfort Temp today, 352-376-2366. That's 352-376-2366. Okay, wanted to pivot into something else, and that's softball, sport that you currently broadcast now that women's basketball is done. So many expectations. Starting the year, run rule 8 of the first 9 games or whatever it was, Kyle, something ridiculous like that. And then this team goes out to the West Coast and kind of gets roughed up a little bit. Comes back, has some success, and then the SEC hits sitting at 4-5 in the conference right now. Boy, some nights look great. Some nights, okay, it's a real yo-yo when it comes to the success. And look, teams go through ebb and flows when it comes to things. So I ask you this, Kyle, you've covered this team. You've been, the voice of Gators women's softball for over half a decade now. You tell me, man, you've seen this team. You've traveled with this team to Oklahoma, where this team sits today. If you're Coach Walton, what boxes are you checking as concern boxes right now as we get ready to hit the second half of this SEC schedule?
Well, I think the biggest one, Seth, is pitching. That's the most glaring thing. I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think the Gators are over a 5.5, possibly a 6 ERA in SEC play. The days of Kelly Barnhill, Lauren Hager, Delaney Gorley, Alicia Ocasio, if you follow Gator softball, you know those names. The days of that dominant pitching in the circle, that's just not where it's at right now. They're going to have to outslug teams, and they were one hit the other day on Sunday. Talked to Coach Walton the other day. He had said that Sunday game was very much an anomaly. They were facing somebody who was throwing gas 75 miles an hour, which is the equivalent on baseball over 100. Spin, incredible. She had 15 strikeouts that day. The Gators were no hit going to the final strike in the 7th inning. They broke up the no hitter. He thought that was an anomaly. The biggest issue that he points out with his team, aside from the pitching and some of the glaring things, he thinks they need to be more competitive. be competitors. And Seth, you follow sports and you kind of know how the culture has shifted, right? When social media has taken over, people kind of think about their own brands a little bit. The competitor, the fierceness, the I want to punch you in the mouth type of athlete. And I don't want to sound like the get off my lawn guy, but that is not as prevalent as it used to be.
You're
I
right.
don't know. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, Kyle, my old man was a coach for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to sit there and, he said, I can teach you a lot of things. To care is not one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you either have that or you don't. And he always used to tell us, when he was coaching me, and you have to have a little turd in you. He's like, I don't want you to be a jerk. I don't want you to go out there and don't be arrogant. But you need to have a little turd in you when you walk out on the field. Like, okay, I'm going for it here. You know what? My better was that Nike campaign. Remember that, Kyle? My better is better than your better.
Uh-huh.
It's not just saying it; it's just doing it. And it's funny that you say that, because I know we're talking about softball, but I'm going to use a parallel to like actors in Hollywood. Brad Pitt walks into the room, and Brad Pitt's not concerned about what any other guy's doing in that room, because he's Brad Pitt. It's like, I'm here. Here are the goods. I know exactly what you mean, because it's the competitive thing. And I always try to tell the students, when it comes to producing whatever you're putting together, podcast or host article or whatever, if you have the mindset of this, and this is just how I feel. This is how I've always been, whether I'm running radio stations, when I was playing baseball and football. Winners, let me take a step back. Losers want to win, winners hate to lose.
Mm-hmm.
Losers want to win, winners hate to lose. But what's the difference? If I have to explain it to you, you don't get it.
Right.
Everybody wants to win. Not everybody hates to lose. So I know exactly what you mean. And that something tells me Coach Walton probably is looking more of everybody wants to win rather than winners, hate to lose right now. How many guys on your team, how many gals on your team hate losing? And that's
Skylar Wallace, because I asked him that question when I followed up. He said there are type A personalities on this team. Not as many as there were when they were winning 70 games, going like 22-2 in the SEC. That's his issue. He said it's kind of been something that's been the case for the last 6 years or so, where they don't have a whole lot of type A personalities. He did provide an example of Skylar Wallace, and I don't know how much you've seen her play this year, but she's absurd. Very reminiscent to the days of Amanda Lorenz, just a sure thing. She did strike out 3 times on Sunday, but when she did, she was in the dugout, pacing back and forth, almost digging her cleats and creating a hole in the cement in the dugout because she was just so angry. We had a moment on Friday night where Coach Walton didn't send the runner on a fly ball to center field. Would have been a sac fly for Skylar Wallace. She was visibly upset with Coach Walton for not sending the runner. She is somebody who doesn't put a whole lot of internal pressure on herself. I asked that of Coach Walton. I say, how much pressure does she put on herself? She's an All-American. When you're not going well, the team success probably isn't going to be very good. She doesn't. She just wants to beat you. She wants to pulverize you. She is that Michael Jordan type A personality. Charlotte Eccles a little bit that way as well. But you get a handful of those on the team. But Seth, I don't know if you're getting a roster full of those types of players. It's a rare breed, but you're not getting a large percentage of players that have that type A personality, I think, as much anymore.
And it's funny because some people think that means like talking trash and fighting. Greg Maddux was that way. Greg Maddux is sitting there in the dugout with his dorky glasses on, charting pitches on his off day. But when he was out on the mound, his nickname was a Bulldog. Tony Gwynn, charting pitches, hitting chart, all those things. Smile on his face, but he was in the batter's box. It was almost like a switch flipped. Patrick Mahomes seems like a nice guy, but do you ever watch him after a touchdown pass? Not so much of a night, So yeah, I understand what you mean completely by that. Kyle Crooks, Seth Harp with you here on this this Thursday as we move forward, getting ready to head into the weekend. I want to visit something college basketball wise, because that's the other sport that you provide play-by-play for. Actually, I'd like to know what sport you haven't called a game. You've done every single one.
I've done gymnastics too.
Yeah, how about that? I think hold the people at Guinness. Let's see what we can do. Maybe we can do like 4 broadcasts in one day. Angel Reese, somebody that you broadcast one of her games this year.
Yeah.
here we are, day 5, and I was getting ready for the show. I see parade video of her in a car, throwing out beads. My Twitter feed gets it. Get your Angel Reese jersey right now.
Mhm.
Okay, so here we are, day 5 of this. The question is, when does attention? And she received a ton of support. Okay, fine, but not accepting people's apologies now. I'm not accepting the Biden's apology. We're not going to the White House, and then inviting yourself to the former president's house, which I don't think that works. Kyle, you want to go to the Obamas this weekend? At what point? At what point does the Bayou Barbie and this love story of, oh, it's somebody standing up for what they believe in, and oh, this is great, it's women empowering? Because she sat there and talked about Joe Biden and said, you're a woman, you're supposed to support us no matter what. Oh boy, once we get from a good story of support and women's strength to obedience and acceptance, and you have to do it, at what point does this plane run out of runway, if you know what I'm saying?
No, I get you. And I know the player that Angel Reese is. She was teed up in our game at Florida. So I know the kind of personality she is, and I get what she's doing at this point in time in the NIL world, the world when you get clout, you kind of want to ride it all the way to the sunset and maximize the financial opportunity. I think that's what she's doing right now, and I get it. I understand it. I respect it. Now let's go back to Sunday, the national championship game. I didn't have any problems with the whole "you can't see me." Caitlin Clark has done it. We've talked about that ad nauseum, right? My issue was the following around the court, right? When you have the moment after the buzzer and you choose to do that as opposed to celebrate with your team, I think that's the biggest thing. Because if you want to compare apples to what Caitlin Clark did, right? When she did this to Louisville and Haley Van Lith and all of that and the trash talk, that was in the game. That was in the moment. That's after she's burying shots or whatever. You do this at the free throw line, that's okay. I'm cool with that. But when the camera pans out to the entire court and Caitlin Clark is on this side by her bench and the game's over, your team is jumping up and down, Kim Mulkey's hugging players, and you're still like 70 feet away from your team because you're doing this to Caitlin Clark, and that's where I had the issue. It's not necessarily apples to Caitlin Clark to what Angel Reese did. I think the internet, we do this in phases. The internet is starting to turn a little bit.
A little bit.
After Angel Reese went out, the whole Joe Biden thing, which obviously was ridiculous. We're not going to invite Iowa, and I think she has gone back on that stuff. We know how
she was sorry.
Yeah. I think she said something in the moment. Yeah. She didn't realize the impact it would have. It's silly. You know, if you lose a game, you're not going to the White House. Iowa would never want to be put in that situation anyway. Yeah. But I think we're at a point now where things are starting to turn, where all of a sudden she's being very unapologetically her, to the point where it's just like kind of odd. It's kind of off. But she is riding this wave of doing the gritty with John Morant on TikTok and the whole parade thing. We've seen athletes over time who have been just kind of celebrating at a high level, I would say, at those parades and things, and say things that maybe they regret. I mean, Tom Brady threw a Lombardi trophy from boat to boat. So we know how some of those celebrations go, but I think things are starting to turn a little bit where you can tell she's trying to cash in on her internet moment, which is okay in a certain respect.
Yeah, and it's fine now. Heavy is the crown. Wait till you start to go on the road in the conference next year.
Yeah, but you know what? That's good, because attention to women's basketball, it's fine. Hostile crowds, you know what? Bring it. That's cool.
I love it. You know, and this is what I wish. And Kyle, I know you're connected with the new NCAA president, and you are, you know, in like Flynn with the people in New York City. ESPN, the SEC, the Big Ten. I looked on the calendar. November 7th is an open date at Madison Square Garden. Those two don't. Iowa and LSU don't play. How about Iowa and LSU start the season at Madison Square Garden on November 7th? It's a Tuesday, so it's not Monday Night Football. The thing would be sold out. You could be the Queens of New York.
Yeah, that's a great point, Seth, because I've always the elite play on a big stage. Let's see if we can fill out an arena. Let's see if we can get 19,000. Now, there were 9.9 million that watched on Sunday. I think there was 14 for the men or whatever, but that was a Sunday at 3:30. That wasn't even a primetime slot. The game Iowa-South Carolina had incredible viewership. So we're seeing people that are involved in the game, but they're involved in stars. Yes. They're involved in the Caitlin Clark versus the Angel Reese, the big bad South Carolina. Can Caitlin Clark slay the beast? Haley Van Lith against Caitlin Clark, the Cavender twins. Like, people love stars. And that's what women's basketball is starting to build now. It's starting to build individual brands and individual stars. So with the bad of the internet, there is the good of the internet. We've built Caitlin Clark now because people aren't watching Iowa regular season women's basketball games. They're just not. But you get the opportunity to capitalize on what Caitlin Clark has done, and that truly does, the old cliche, let's build the game. It is building the game where now you could have the opportunity where you never would have thought of it 10 years ago to play a standalone game in Madison Square Garden and sell – possibly sell out the building, have it on ESPN. That's a great idea.
And it's funny where women's basketball is now, Kyle. Women's basketball now is doing what the men's basketball did 30 years ago, where it's Fab Five, Chris Webber, Christian Laettner, Bobby Hurley, Duke, Jason Kidd. Let's build. And the stars come back 30 years ago in the men's game. The women's stars come back. Yeah. So the fact that you can build this over the course of 2 or 3 years, it's good. Strike where the iron's hot. Women are better at social media than men. Men would rather follow women on social media than other men. So, the women, your audience is going to be there. And now you're growing this thing. And Kyle, let's face it, the women's championship game, even though the men's had higher ratings, it was the Monday leading into the championship game in PTI. And I was watching ESPN. I was telling the students, pay attention to this. You say stars don't matter. We're talking about the women's game from yesterday more than talking about the men's game tonight. And then the men's game was over. And then what are we doing on Tuesday? Caitlin Clark's going to talk with Jeremy Schaap on ESPN. We're done with the men. It's over. We're done. We're continuing these storylines because, and a wise man once told me this, people love to hear people talk about other people. And this still has a lifeblood. Now, how long does it go? Tiger Woods in contention on Sunday and forget about it. Then here we go to the next level, right? But it's been an amazing story, and people are taking sides. The good guy can become the bad guy. It's professional wrestling. I just hope that the powers to be realize that you've got to get these two teams together at some point next year before we'll get together in the Final Four. You got to get them together. And golf has figured this out to some extent. When they couldn't get Phil and Tiger, and we're going to wait for the final pairing on Sunday. This is like 15, 20 years ago. It's like, whatever, put them together on Thursday. They made it together all 4 days. Get them together as soon as possible.
It's like Mayweather Pacquiao, right? They got together like years after people wanted to see it.
3 years too late, about 3 years too late. Seth Harp, Kyle Crooks with you here on this Thursday, brought to you by QC Kinetics. If you have pain in your joints, shoulders, knee, or back, not going to go away, you need to check out QC Kinetics for long-lasting relief. Not surgery, drugs, or downtime. Nope. Schedule your free consultation at QC Kinetics. Locations in Ocala, now open in Gainesville as well. 352-400-4550. That's 352-400-4550. Joe writes in, talking about Angel Reese. One thing to do that in the moment, but you got to move on. Yeah, well, she's not going to move on because it brought her the attention. So she's going to continue to drag away at that thing. All right. I got a couple minutes left as we start to, we talk about what's coming up this weekend. Talking about softball, baseball. Good gracious. Were there 9 walks the other night? Kyle, I was at that game Sunday, and the pitch clock changes and all these rules. We have a 4-hour and 21-minute baseball game where there are, 15 walks. Auburn pitchers walked 15 Gators. And then we had 9 walks the other night on Tuesday night. My poor producers getting used to these 2.5-hour baseball games now doing 4.5-hour baseball games. From baseball games that you have broadcast, what's this team, 25-5?
Mhm.
7-2 in the conference. Okay, Kyle, this team compared to the team that won the national title in 2017, what should be the ceiling for this team now that we are, you ready for this, almost 2 months into the season?
It's crazy, and I look at the softball schedule, Seth, and we're almost right at, that SEC tournament in Fayetteville. It moves pretty quick. I think offensively, this is one of the better teams I think Sully has had. I think there's no doubt about it. The unanswered runs they had, what was it, Sunday? I didn't get to watch a whole lot of the series because I was in South Carolina, but they had that deficit on Sunday, and then they put up I don't know the exact number of unanswered runs to go away with the game. I think bullpen is the biggest issue for this team right now. Is that going to let them down in the long run? I think Sproat did not have a good start this weekend on Friday night. That's an issue. I don't think that's going to continue to happen. Now you have Tennessee for 3 games over the weekend. I think that's going to tell us a lot more about this team. Tony Vitello's had, we'll see if he gets thrown out this weekend. He's one of those, you talk about sports needs villains.
Oh,
Tony
yes.
Vitello, if you live outside of Knoxville, he is a true sports villain, which I think is cool. His players love to play for him. Fans love him, but he's a villain. He's a villain. It's going to be, offensively, Seth, I think this team is primed to go to Omaha. Weekend starters primed to go to Omaha. Bullpen, you have the ebbs and flows, some of the struggles that are throughout that lineup, but you took care of business for the most part this weekend against Auburn. We'll see. It's a lot. I'm gonna read a lot from this team over the next 3 days and what they do against Tennessee.
Yeah, and people email, call the station, like, 7-2, but we're only in 3rd place, because it's like, guys, win every series. If you win every series, you're going to win the SEC. Yeah. Just take 2 or 3. Just take 2 or 3, and you're going to be fine. And it's one of these things that I always try to encourage people to do this. Enjoy it. And this team's 25-5. Enjoy it. Well, what's going to happen in college? We're going to host a regional, going to host a super regional. Guys, enjoy some of this stuff. I always say it's like your kids. Enjoy them. One day they're going to be brats and teenagers. They have zits all over their face and smell bad and telling you they hate you. So just sit back and enjoy them for a little while. And that's where this baseball team's extremely enjoyable to watch. It's fun. It's got the best player in all of college baseball. Still wish the university would do something cool with him at the baseball grounds and maybe Jack's Pack right field. I keep bringing it up. So people just don't go to games, just stare at him, because when he comes to the plate, it's an event. Everything stops. So anyway. All right, let's see here before we wrap this thing up. PodUp with Matthews in the morning is brought to you by Ruse-Ogre State Farm, a team dedicated to insurance professionals ready to help life go in the right direction with the right insurance options for you and your family. Visit ogreinsurance.com. Give them a call, 352-240-1779, 352-240-1779. I love the Masters. It's a fun tournament, Kyle, but I'm one of these guys. If it's no name 1, no name 2, this is one sport that I don't love for purity of the sport. Mm-hmm. If you don't have at least 1 star around on Sunday, I'll watch it because it's a cool course and it's beautiful. But Rory, Tiger, Spieth, Dustin Johnson, Scotty Scheffler, that's great. I'm not zoned in for that guy. Brooks Koepka's great. He's like Tony Parker. I'm not dropping what I'm doing to watch that guy. I know you're broadcasting games, but depending on the rain and the weather and how this shifts around, I'm not going to ask you for a prediction, but how do you consume a tournament like that, the majors in golf?
Yeah, so I used to be big into golf, Seth. I used to play in high school. I was the captain of the golf team. I used to watch the Arizona Waste Management Open on weekends. Those days have since gone since I stopped golf. I just couldn't deal with the mental frustration of it all, so I gave it up. I will tune in, like you said. For me now, I'm not watching. I might have it on in the background, but I'm not locked in unless it's stars, unless it's Rory, unless it's Tiger, unless it's Dustin Johnson, things like that. That's probably going to be the case. The way I'll consume this is I will be invested if there's stars, but if not, it's probably going to be background noise, or I might be watching something else. I might be watching a softball game, or actually they're not playing on Sunday because it's Easter Sunday, but the rest of the weekend I'm probably might be watching something else. I used to be all in, not as much anymore. In terms of a prediction, I'll go with Rory. I'll go with Rory to take in the green jacket here this weekend. Whether our watch is a different we'll see. We'll see about that.
It's too bad because, I mean, in an ideal world, of course, Tiger, you want there, but I mean, I'd love to have Phil Mickelson, live tour, Rory, outspoken. I want some of that. I want some of that action, right? And for everybody that said, well, letting the live golfers around, could you imagine if they weren't around? Like 75% of the best golfers in the world are on that tour right now. It's like, oh, this is a shame. It's interesting. And golf usually is not interesting, with the exception of the majors. So, the Ryder Cup. So there you go. Who's going to win? Just please have a big name up there on Sunday. Like I always tell people, give me a reason to not go outside in Florida. Give me a reason